Introducing Recorded Content, a podcast for small, scrappy B2B marketing teams who want to get the most out of podcasting. In each episode, we capture stories from industry experts and podcasters. Listen in and uncover what it takes to launch, run, and grow a successful B2B podcast. Check out and subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Let's jump in.
Hey, this is Justin Brown. I'm the co-founder of Motion and your host for this episode of Recorded Content. Recorded Content is brought to you by Motion, a done-for-you podcast agency for small, scrappy B2B tech marketers. Today, I have Marisa Eikenberry on the show. Marisa currently runs 3 podcasts and hosts one herself. Let me repeat that back. Marisa currently runs 3 podcasts and does the back-end production work, including editing, writing, and repurposing. It takes a special person to have all of those skills, the skills to do all of that different type of work. And Marisa's background, surprisingly, or probably unsurprisingly, is as a web developer. She has a background in web and audio and has been able to translate that into running a powerful podcast engine for the Kevin Eikenberry Group. So with that, Marisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So to start this conversation today, I wanted to tell you, one of the things that I say in every sales conversation for a prospective new customer for Motion is podcasting is hard. It's my first slide. And podcasting is hard. And you run 3 of them. So where I want to get started is just to have you tell me about your evolution of 3 podcasts and how that came about.
Of course. So thankfully, not all of them happened at the same time. There was quite a bit of, time in between all of them. So I joined the Kevin Eikenberry Group in 2014. As you said, I'm a web developer. That was originally what I was hired to do. Audio was never part of the picture. And in 2016, my boss, Kevin Eikenberry, had decided, you know what, I'm a leadership thought leader. We should start a podcast. What does it take to do one? And of everybody on the team, I was the only one that had any sort of audio experience or audio editing experience from my time at Ball State University as a TCOM student. So that made it pretty easy. I was also already a podcast listener, so that also made things pretty easy because I knew kind of what to edit for. So we launched that podcast in 2016. And then in 2019, we launched Talk Like a Leader with Guy Harris. And then this year, 2022, is when we launched Long Distance Work Life, which is the one that I co-host on, which that was originally not part of the plan either. I had talked to my co-host, Wayne Trammell, who has done a bunch. He's done a lot of podcast interviews and stuff for a long time. He used to have a podcast called Cranky Middle Manager, and they have a new book coming out next year, Long Distance Team. And so I was like, so when are you starting a podcast, Wayne? And the more that he was talking about it, he was like, you know what? If I'm going to do this, I need a co-host. Otherwise, I'm just going to rant about remote work for 10 minutes. So we started that in March.
What was it like getting to be on the other end of the microphone, going from being the back end to both front end and back end?
I will admit, at first, it was really scary. I was really afraid I was going to screw it up. I wasn't really sure what I was doing. In some cases, I still don't. So I'm still figuring some of that out, how to do intros a little bit better, how to do outros a little bit better. But one of the biggest things, and it took me a while before I realized it, I always felt like, and I mean, I've been in the podcast industry since 2016, but this whole time I've always been, oh, I'm just an editor. I'm not really part of the podcast community. I'm just an editor. And well, first of all, I wasn't giving myself enough credit. That was silly. But being a co-host kind of helped me realize that, no, I've been in this community for a long time and I should kind of take ownership of that. So that's probably been the biggest change for me just in the, 4 months since I've been doing this.
And you have a background in web development. How do you think that that's helped you when it comes to podcasting?
I think one of the biggest things is that to be a web developer, you really have to be attention-oriented, very detail-oriented. And so I think about all of those little things. I think it also is really helpful as far as repurposing content and just creating podcast websites anyway. I was a big proponent every time we've launched a podcast that it's like, we need a podcast website. What does the podcast website need to have? Oh, this, and this. And so already having that background made it really easy to create these websites.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you see it I think recently on LinkedIn, I talked about how over the last 2 years, there has been, well, there first was a huge migration to podcasting, which is everyone is at home and they wanted to create content from their house and sit in front of a computer and talk into it. And then I think recently on LinkedIn, what I refer to it as is this podcasting graveyard, which is that so many podcasts have died over the last 2 years because people set out to do them and then realized, well, wow, it's much more than sitting in front of my computer. It's then editing audio. It's then having to build out the website behind it. It's then having to repurpose the content. And oh, by the way, am I even good on camera? Am I able to book the guests on time? So it's really a lot of different mediums that go into this one this one style of content.
Absolutely. And I can't remember the exact statistic right now, but I read something recently that was like, there's a certain percentage of podcasts that don't even get past episode 3. And that was just
Yeah. I think
mind-blowing
it's
to
not I
me.
think it's
I think
90%
you're
don't
right.
make
I
it
couldn't
past
remember if it was
episode
80 or
I
90.
I think I think it's 90% don't make it past episode 10.
That's right. And
Don't quote me
yeah,
on that, but I think that's the number I
and
heard.
it's just so wild to me that it's like, once you get past episode 10, oh, you really know what you're doing. And oh, by the way, like you're a little bit more established now. You're probably going to keep continuing to do this.
And have probably built a system to do it.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about so we're gonna get into talking about maybe some of your systems and how you execute on the work. But where I'd like to start is talking just a little bit about each show and what you do with each show, because I think it's valuable to the audience to hear not only because podcasting is a great experience from what you get out of it to the experience of doing it. Like you, and I'm not sure what you did in college. But I was on radio. I did radio in college. I was on the student radio station. I worked at a local radio station, and I loved this medium. So there is a lot that you get out of it, but there's also it's not as easy as just sitting down and hitting record. So I'll be curious to hear some of the work that you do, but I want to break down each show so that the audience gets to hear, what work you put in. So what do you do? And I'm going to go through each show. So let's start with The Remarkable Leader.
That one, I edit the audio and video versions. I put them out on Libsyn is the platform that we use and have been using for the last 6 years. It's been great for us. So I put all of that together. I also do any of the repurposing. So any clips that you see that come out, I do those. I also put all of our show notes on the website. So even though I'm not the one that writes the show notes, I'm the one that makes sure that they show up.
And so so what kind of programs are you working in? So let's break this down. So what are you recording in?
So we're currently, we've done a few different ones, but right now we're actually recording in StreamYard. So Kevin
Okay.
actually does all of his episodes live. And so I basically download it from there and then edit accordingly.
Okay. And then talk to me about editing and repurposing. What are you using to do that?
Adobe Premiere would be the biggest one that I'm using. So this might be a little controversial. I edit the video first and then, get the music where it needs to be and all that. And then I export out the video version and then I export out the MP3 version at the same time.
And then when it comes to the repurposed clips, what are you doing for that? So audience probably hears what I'm doing here. We're already working in StreamYard. We're doing live streams. We have to coordinate a live stream. Then from there, we have to do, we have to break it out and edit it in Premiere. And I assume, but I'll be interested to hear. Are you cutting your clips out of there? Are you using tools like Headliner? Like what's your approach there?
Yeah, so I've messed with Headliner a little bit before, and I do think it's a really great program for people that don't have access to things like Premiere. But because I already do have access to Premiere, it just made it easy to kind of keep everything together. For the most part, when we do clips, I do video only clips. I've been thinking about experimenting with both like those Headliner type audio clips as well as video ones just to see, does the difference change anything? But for the most part, everything's done inside of Premiere.
And then from there, you're distributing, I think you said on Libsyn?
Yes. Yeah. So our platform is Libsyn. It has been this whole time.
Nice. And I apologize for calling it The Remarkable Leader. You'll hear when I ask you about the next show. It's the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. So now I want to talk to you about Talk Like a Leader. I think I got that one right.
Yes, that is correct. So Talk Like a Leader is with Guy Harris. I actually have a little bit more hands-on with that one, but he records that one in Audacity. It's not a live show, and for the most part, he doesn't have any guests involved. When he does have guests, I believe he's using Zoom for that, but don't quote me because it's been a while since we've done a guest episode. With that one, he writes the description, but I'm the one checking to see like, okay, what are our related episodes that we want to mention in the show notes? What are our CTAs that we want in there? That kind of thing. And that's just an audio version. We don't have a video of that. And each episode is about 10 minutes long. So we don't do clips of that one right now, but we do make quote graphics based on some of the things that Guy says. So I create those inside of Canva.
Yeah, and it is tough because there's so many tools that are out there. If you kind of cross-reference with what you're doing or what I'm doing, I think the only tool that we use that's the same at this point, and I'd like to think we both do a good job. The only tool that we use that's the same at this point was that you just mentioned, Canva. For our recording, we're recording in Squadcast, which we're doing today. For our distribution, we're using Buzzsprout. For our editing, we're using Descript, and then for video, we're using everything from After Effects to pulling things out in Descript. So, there is a lot of information out there. There are tons of tools, and you have to find the stack that works for you, which kind of just, dovetails back into the point that I was making, which is, this can be a heavy lift if you don't know what you're doing and it takes time to learn it. And you're lucky enough to have been doing it since 2016, because I imagine I wasn't even podcasting in 2016. I imagine in 2016, there weren't nearly as many tools as there are today.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think at the time in 2016, when we first launched, all of our guest episodes were done inside of Zoom. The quality wasn't as nice as it is now. Zoom also, upped their game quite a bit. And then once we started using StreamYard, just everything changed from then on. I've been using Premiere the whole time, Premiere and Audition, because we used to not have a video component. We were recording it, but I didn't have a strong enough computer to do all the video editing to actually push out a video version of the episode. So I was using Audition for all of those, which is also actually, now that I think about it, Audition is what I'm using for Talk Like a Leader, not Premiere. That was my bad. But I'm pretty much Adobe Suite for almost everything except for Canva, because it just makes things a little bit easier for those of us that are not quite as graphically inclined.
Yeah, we use Adobe Creative Cloud for the majority of the, if you see the promo videos that we do with graphics, that's being done in After Effects. But then we're using Descript for a lot of stuff, which I can't recommend more highly. It takes a lot of that complex work and does make it easier. Let's talk a little bit about the show that you're probably most excited to talk about. Nah, I won't shortchange the other two, but the one where you actually get to go and do your thing, which is the long distance work life. So what are you doing with the long distance work life podcast?
So long distance work life, I'm doing almost everything except for scheduling guests. So I'm recording with Wayne. We always record 2 episodes at a time. So we'll record 2 episodes. We still use StreamYard for that, even though we're not doing a live episode there. We're just using it to record. From there, I'm doing all of our show note descriptions, any of our related episodes. I also use Premiere for all of our podcasts, actually, to get a transcript out, which is usually posted in our show notes. One of the other things that I do is for any of the episodes that Wayne and I are on together, I pick our topic. So I'm researching, what are we going to talk about? What questions am I going to ask? Like, all of that stuff is all me. We will go over that a little bit before we start recording, and Wayne is very good about going on the spot. So if I'm like, hey, let's talk about GIFs and small talk on remote teams, and he's like, okay, let's go. So, but I am the one that does a lot of the research for that. I don't have anything to do with our guest episodes other than editing them, repurposing them, putting them up online. But so Wayne does all of our guest scheduling. He does all of the guest interviews and that kind of thing. But everything else is pretty much me.
Did I just hear you? You're a GIF person, not a GIF person?
When I found out that the creator calls it GIF, I was like, yep. But yes, I
Well,
realize it's very controversial.
You're a traditionalist. You've been podcasting since 2016, which no one started podcasting, it seems, until 2019, 2020. You call them GIFs, so I appreciate the traditionalist aspect. My next question, it's no secret that if your company has 3 podcasts, and I don't know how big your organization is, I can't imagine that it's huge. And I know very, very big companies who have 1 podcast and are maybe trying for a second. Clearly, you all have found that this is a good avenue for you for content, why has your company invested so heavily in podcasting?
So one of the big things, so our company's 13 people, to answer your question, and not all of us are even full time. I am, but we have some other people who are not. And one of the biggest reasons why we decided to start podcasting and why we continue to do it is this thought leadership piece. So we're a leadership and learning consulting company. We teach people how to be better leaders, better bosses, better communicators. And one of the ways that we realized that that would be really effective is let's, get their audio on their phone. Let's make sure that we're portable, a way for them to access that content wherever they are. And
Mm.
especially when we first started with the Remarkable Leadership podcast, and Kevin was interviewing still is interviewing all of these thought leaders and leadership experts and all of that kind of thing. And it was just this amazing way to get content, not only from us, but also from these other people and to share it out in such a wide way that we weren't quite finding with some of our YouTube videos that we've done since 2014 and some of the other newsletters and things like that that we've been putting out for quite a while now.
And what kind of impacts have you seen it have on the organization?
Yeah, so, in some cases, we've had, clients come to us because they heard us on, Remarkable Leadership Podcast. We haven't had that yet with Long Distance Work Life, but we hope to, but we're also still pretty tiny. So, talk like l
And you may never hear it, and
it's also completely
you
possible.
may have already had multiple leads, and they just didn't say it, or it wasn't, what have you.
That
But
Yeah, that's absolutely true, and I will say one of the other things that has been really great about the podcast, and like I said, especially the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, which is our biggest one, it's our most promoted, but one of the biggest things was that if we have a client who wants to hire Kevin to speak at their event, do a keynote event, which is something that we do a lot, we're able to say, "Oh, you want to know about, communication, or you want to hear him talk about this specific subject? Oh, here are these episodes where he's talking to guests about this." And so it's been another avenue to kind of like help a client see, oh, this is what they're going to get when they hire the Kevin Eikenberry Group.
completely different pivot. How do you manage your time?
I'm a big fan of task blocking. I know some people call it time blocking. I'm a little bit more task oriented, so that's probably why I call it something slightly different. But I learned about it from Cal Newport's book, Deep Work. And so essentially there's this premise that like at 10 a.m. every Monday, I'm editing the Remarkable Leadership podcast. And on Wednesday at 2 p.m., I'm going to edit Long Distance Work Life. So I always have it scheduled in my calendar that like this is when I'm going to work on this. So I never have to worry about, oh, well, when is it going to happen? Like this is exactly when it's going to happen every time. It might move a little bit depending on meetings and all that kind of thing, but that has probably been the number one thing that has helped me get all of the different things that I do done.
Yeah, I can only imagine that the amount of deliverables that you're creating out of all of these different shows, you can't just fly by the seat of your pants. I mean, you absolutely are going to have systems in place, so that your time is managed appropriately.
Absolutely. I mean, like you already said, like, yes, I'm doing all of this podcast stuff, but oh, by the way, I'm still a web developer. Like, I never
Mm.
stopped doing that. We're actually doing a complete rebrand on all of our stuff that's going to be coming like later in September. So that's a project that I'm still working on. We have a piece of our business, the disc personality testing. I do customer support on that every day. So I'm answering support emails all the time and I'm doing editing and stuff on that website and creating different things for that. I'm still the tech support for our team. Like there are all of these other things that I still do on top of all of this podcast stuff. So if I didn't have time blocking or task blocking or whatever you want to call it, like I probably would go a little insane.
For the audience, DISC is a personality assessment, one that I spent a lot of time using when I used to interview potential sales reps. So I'm very curious, Marissa, what your DISC score is, because the task oriented working behind a computer would be either S or C. I can't remember. It's been a long time. But then the being on a podcast and being personable on social media, that would probably fall more under an I. And then you probably have to take command by wrangling a bunch of execs, which would be a high D. So what is your DISC score? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I'm actually CDS, so high cautious with dominant and supportive traits. So the
Okay.
cautious, that's where all the task-oriented stuff comes in. That's where all the detail-oriented stuff comes in. All of these itty-bitty little things come in. The dominant stuff, that's all of the task stuff. That's, I'm gonna get this thing done, and then it's this, and then it's this. A little bit more
And yelling
fast-paced.
at CEOs and execs and telling them where they have to be and when and putting your foot, because I'm dead serious. It's my next question. Literally, is how do you wrangle so many execs? And I think my answer is you have to be a high D personality that it just tells them where they have to be and when.
Believe it or not, I don't have to do that much. So Kevin,
Oh, tell me more about
yeah,
that.
so Kevin works with our producer Lisa to do all of our guest stuff, and she basically schedules everything. And he's very like, he's somebody who lives by his calendar. You can
Okay.
find out where he's at any moment by opening up his Google Calendar, and then we know exactly where he is. So for him, it's not a big deal. He knows, oh, on Monday at this time, I'm doing a live with such and such person. He's already prepared for it. So there's no wrangling there. Guy, he records his episodes when he records them and then lets me know when they're available. As long as it's available before I go to edit it, then we're good. Um,
Yeah.
and occasionally we've had some time where he's like, hey, I'm not going to be able to get this in time. Can we re-release an older episode? So we have
Mm.
done that. It's the only podcast we've done that on, but there have been some reasons why we've done that rather than just not have an episode that week. And then with Wayne, he deals with all of his guest interviews, like I already said, especially because sometimes he's interviewing some international clients. And so, it's a completely different time zone for them. But he and I pretty much just get together. We actually had a meeting earlier today where it was like, okay, we need to do another set of episodes. That way we're good through August. When do you want to record it? Okay, let's record it next week at this time. You pick the topics and let me know. So it's really not a lot of wrangling. It's not a lot of quote unquote yelling. I'm not a yeller anyway. So it's not as bad as you'd think. I'm probably very lucky in that respect.
Well, I think the fact that you don't have to schedule the guests for any of the 3 shows probably helps a lot and allows you to put your head down a little bit more and focus on the work rather than the coordination and scheduling and things like that.
Absolutely. I got to focus a little bit more on the task stuff that I love as opposed to the people stuff that I don't love as much.
What takes you the most time?
Probably the transcript editing. So that's one of the things that we've started doing in the last couple of months is I go into Premiere. For those of you that don't know, Premiere has a transcription feature now that is completely free and it's beautiful. So I let Premiere go ahead and edit a transcript for me. And then I go through that transcript and I edit it as needed. So sometimes it hears my name weird and it thinks I'm Chris instead of Marissa. It's a computer generated thing. That's what it's going to do. So I go through and I edit that, which does take quite a while. But from there, I click a button and I have captions instantly. And then I can take those captions and now, the clips that I'm going to put out, we have captions underneath them. So when people listen to them silently, no problem. They know exactly what's being said, which is something I've been a big proponent of the last couple of weeks because I know so many people watch their social media on silent or with low volume. And so it's a way for them to still get that content without necessarily hearing it. But that's probably the biggest time suck for me personally.
And do you outsource anything?
No, we used to do some transcriptions through Rev, but that gets to be really kind of expensive. And so we just stopped doing it. Even though it was something we really wanted to do and we wanted to have transcripts available, we couldn't justify that kind of cost. But once we found out that Premiere would do transcripts and I do some other video editing and stuff anyway. And so like once I came up to Kevin and I was like, hey, Premiere does transcripts now for free. And he was like, that just paid for your entire Adobe subscription for the year. So that's been a huge help. And that's definitely been something that has helped us quite a bit.
So this is kind of a fun question just because you've been at it for as long as you have. What's something that you do now that you're very good at that used to take you a long time?
Honestly, and technically, I haven't been doing it that long, but content repurposing has been something that we've really started doing a lot more in the last probably year or so, is when we started doing clips for the Remarkable Leadership podcast, now for Long Distance Work Life. And I didn't know how to put captions on top of a video. I didn't know how to make it look good on all of the different platforms. There were so many things that I didn't know. And now I can get one done in, 15, 20 minutes if I know exactly what I'm cutting. And I've learned about other tools to like take out all the silences instantly. I hit a button, it'll tell me where all of them are. I hit another button, it pulls them out. So that's made it really easy, and I've also found some different way as I've been on LinkedIn more and I've been on TikTok and some other platforms where people are posting their podcasts, I'm seeing, "Oh, we're not just posting, our videos on little black screens with white text on it anymore. Like, we're making it fancy, we're branding it accordingly." And so learning how to do that has been actually really fun.
Yeah, I have no idea how long you and I have been connected on LinkedIn, but I wanted to just ask you about that is, you know, something that I've seen is just that you're getting very active in the podcast LinkedIn community, which I have a variety of like people who engage with my posts because I post pretty much every day about podcasting and I don't get like crazy engagement or anything because I post little boring tips and tricks. But the people who care about podcasting, I like to think, enjoy my content. So how did you decide you were going to get started on, being active on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so I have always known that LinkedIn was a really great place to be. I just never felt like I had a place there. I'm a web developer. I'm not a salesperson. So it wasn't like I could go on and like, okay, I'm going to get these clients and stuff cuz like that's not my job. That's not part of what I do. And I don't want to step on the salespeople's toes. Like, we're all a team. We're all having fun. But when we were gonna launch the long distance work life, it was like, "Okay, this is partially mine. This is ownership now."
Mm,
And I knew that Wayne was gonna promote some of it, but really, like, if this was gonna do well, somebody needed to promote it, and it was gonna be me. And so I just went ahead and took ownership of that, and so I got back on LinkedIn. Well, I've been on LinkedIn since, like, 2010. It was part of a college assignment, "Make a LinkedIn account." But
mhm.
in March, right before we launched the podcast, it was like, "Okay, I'm gonna be on here and I'm gonna be posting." And as I'm on LinkedIn more, I'm learning, okay, what kinds of content is okay to post? How do you entertain without necessarily asking for things all the time? And so one of the things that I've been really enjoying too is taking a topic that, Wayne and I just talked about or Wayne talked about with a guest, and I can take a look at the transcript and go, "Oh, here was this great point that we made about, you know, monitoring people, uh, monitoring remote teams on their computer or something." And I can take that piece, rework it a little bit, and now it's a LinkedIn post. And I don't necessarily say that it came from an episode, but
Mm.
the content is what was important, and if they really want to, they can look up and go, "Oh, she's the co-host of the Long Distance Work Life. I wonder if that's something that they talked about," or something like that. I still obviously post things about the podcast, and I still post links to the podcast, once or twice a week, but I'm trying not to ask too much, I guess, and trying to be more entertaining, more informative about remote work leadership and that kind of thing. So it's been really kind of a whirlwind. I mean, I know that you and I connected, I believe in March or April. It hasn't been too long, but it's definitely been within that time frame. And that's been really fun. I know that I've connected with a lot of other people in the podcasting community. I've connected with a lot of people in the remote work community. And just seeing all of the learning from all of those different people has been really kind of incredible. And, not that followers and numbers are like super important, but it's been kind of exciting to me to see that number grow even just in the short time that I've been on LinkedIn because it's like, "Oh my gosh, I know something." Like what I know is worth sharing because I mean, we haven't really talked about this, but me being a co-host on the Long Distance Work Life, I'm really there as an amateur to Wayne's expert. I'm not
Mm.
an expert in remote work. I've been working that way for quite a while now, since 2014 when I started. We've always been a hybrid team, and I've had stints where I've worked in the office all the time, but the rest of the team was pretty much remote, or there's been times that I've been completely remote. Even now, I'm in my house, and so I work from home 3 times a week, but that's also been just something that's been really interesting too, is that, yes, I'm the amateur to this amateur expert, but it doesn't mean that I don't know anything. And so being able to share some of that info and realizing that that info should be shared and can be shared by me on LinkedIn and seeing people really resonate with it has been pretty incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I was the same way. I probably got a LinkedIn in 2010,
Mhm.
like you did.
Yeah.
I think I was like a junior in college and probably had to do it for a class. And for years, I would maybe post something here or there, wouldn't really do anything. And then you're like, I'm never posting again. And, what do I even share? What do I say? Blah, blah, blah. And then we launched our podcast in 2019 and it gave me a voice. I felt like I had something to say. And the thing that I'll say to you is, you're talking about being an amateur. And I tell this to all of our customers, not all of our customers, because some of our customers are experts, but other customers that I have are marketers in very complex spaces, whether that's fintech or cybersecurity
Mhm.
or something like that. And they're a marketer. I mean, they don't have a background in cybersecurity and stopping threats from Russia and
Right.
China from breaking into our financial institutions. But they're talking to people who are talking about that subject matter. And now I don't think that they necessarily become subject matter experts on how to protect or what have you. But they do become subject matter experts in more of a reporter, newscaster type way. And what I mean by that is, for you, if you talk to 50 people over the course of the time that you're doing your show about remote work, I would say you're probably in the top 1% of, let's say you do, how often is your show?
Once a week.
Okay, so let's say over the course of a year, you do 50 episodes of your show. I don't think that there will be maybe. I would put you in the top 1% of people who had conversations about remote work with 50 individuals in 1 year. And that's something that's just very interesting to me of how people through podcasts, become subject matter experts, thought leaders on spaces that yes, maybe I'm not implementing these systems and maybe I'm not, the one fighting off cybersecurity threats, but hey, I've talked to 50 CISOs in a year. I mean, these are some of the most difficult people to track down in the entire world, or 50 CFOs, and I'm talking to people in finance. And that I think is very powerful. And you see people who in sports who, they're reporters, but they write books about basketball, and that's because they have the ability to go and spend 6 months with Shaq and learn everything about him. And so I think that in podcasting, there is, even if you're not necessarily the subject matter expert and you're more of the amateur, you really do have these amazing insights because you've had 50. How long is the show typically?
It's about 20 minutes at the max.
Yes, you've had 50, 20-minute conversations with people in a space. I mean, that is a wealth of information.
Absolutely. And just a reminder, I'm not on our guest episodes, so I don't actually interview any of those guests. That's all Wayne. But one of the things, as I have really immersed myself, especially in LinkedIn, I learned so much there. But a lot of the things that I learned through remote work and all that, I've been able to immediately take back to the show. And, people started talking about what's the difference between remote friendly and remote first. And I was like, I don't know. I actually don't know. But I bet Wayne does. Let's talk about it. And so that's also been really fun because some of those questions are things that Wayne isn't going to think about necessarily because he's been teaching about remote work for 15 years, which has also been
Yeah,
an incredible reason why we started the show to kind of point out that, like, yeah, a bunch of people started thinking about remote work in 2020 because they had to. But we've been
right.
talking about remote work for, 10 years with the Kevin Eikenberry Group because we're subject matter experts. We've been doing this for a really long time. And so being able to learn those little things here and there and to be able to bring that fresh perspective and in some cases also bring a younger perspective that Wayne's not necessarily going to have just by nature of being a different age than I am. And so that's also been really incredible to see how both of our experiences can kind of come together and we can both learn from each other.
Yeah, for sure. Completely different situation, but I went and saw a financial advisor yesterday, and they actually said something very similar, which is in their firm, they have multiple people look at each situation because if you try to go get financial advice from someone who's 35 and you try and go get financial advice from someone who's 65, they may give you different perspectives and different ideas. And I think that that is replicable across industries, where you might have someone who's been marketing for 20 years and someone who's been marketing for 10 years and someone who's been marketing for 5. They've seen different things and probably have different insights. So I'm sure people appreciate the different perspectives that you and Wayne can give them.
Yeah, we've definitely heard a lot of really good feedback with that. I know we did an episode about 3 weeks ago or so about multi-generational teams. I mean, we both have been working on the Kevin Eikenberry Group. I've been there for 8 years, and I think Wayne has been there for 7. But this whole idea of like we're already on a multi-generational team, and oh, by the way, we're a multi-generational podcast duo. And so it was this concept of, okay, what are the different perspectives that we can bring on both sides? And we kind of both came to the conclusion of people are people and please treat them that way. But not everybody thinks that way. That's a whole different discussion. But we got a lot of feedback on that episode, which is the first time that we had really gotten feedback at all. But it was really incredible to see these people say, "Oh my gosh!" Like hearing both of you guys come together, like it didn't necessarily feel like an amateur expert kind of thing. It was both of us coming together and talking about the subject together, which is really what we're hoping to see and to do, especially as we keep continuing with the podcast.
Awesome. Well, it's going to be fun to continue to see your evolution. Yeah, like you said, I mean, we I think met, you're connected in March. I
Yeah.
probably reached out to you about 2 months later and was like, "Hey, you want to come on the podcast?" And now here we are. So with that, I think this is a good spot to end. We're coming up on our time. But I did want to ask you, where can people go to find more about you, your shows, the Kevin Eikenberry Group? I'll leave that one up to you.
Yeah. So if they want to learn more about the Kevin Eikenberry Group, they can go to kevineikenberry.com. It's EIKEN, not IKEN. You can also learn more about long distance work life at longdistanceworklife.com. But on kevineikenberry.com, you'll see links to all of our podcasts, everything about our leadership organization, and so much more. And if anybody wants to, they can contact me on LinkedIn. I'm more than willing to accept connection requests, and I would love to chat with you.
Awesome. Well, Marissa, thank you so much for coming on Recorded Content. It was great having you.
Thank you so much for asking me.